Welcome to the third in our series of films on trained fruit pruning. In this film we'll be looking at fan-trained trees, which traditionally are planted against the walls, making full use of the warmth and shelter that the bricks provide. We begin with plums and other stone fruit such as apricots, and then we'll move on to figs.
Welcome to one of our plum walls. So this is our west-facing wall, traditionally a hot wall. You can see just in the corner by the blue door, there are bees that live in the crevices in the wall. So please be aware of them. Sometimes when you see unpruned areas, sometimes it's because we can't get to them because there are bees. So you can see I've got a couple of predicaments on this wall. So we have here quite a lot of different kind of form, shall we say. You can see we've missed the boat with spring pruning, because normally we'd pinch out the early shoots, we'd look at shoots to fill the framework. I think also what you can see, there's an awful lot of structural wood on here and not a lot of new material on some of these specimens actually. But we're at this point in summer that we do really need to take a course of action to keep the framework in check initially, take out the usual Ds, dead, damaged, diseased, dying. Look at anything extremely vertical, because you can see, you know, most trees want to go up as well. There's an awful lot of dominance here. You can see we're almost getting trees upon trees, and obviously that's going to be very, very problematic, because again, it's going to take away any energy. But we're at the point now we want to try and tie in what we can, what's left of this framework, and also try and fill in the gaps, and hopefully try and do some pruning to create some spurs for next year. Because ideally what you do earlier in the season before fruiting, we'd prune some of these back with at least 5 to 10 leaves to about 6 buds or so, and then after fruiting we'd prune them back to about 3 buds. So we're kind of at the point now we want to do some restrictive pruning, not much like our apples now. You know, we're not looking early part of season, we're looking at kind of late summer, shall we say. It's really important that we don't prune into winter, because we want to reduce the likelihood of silverleaf, which I'm sure you are familiar with, and bacterial canker, which generally comes from pruning late in season. Pruning cuts don't heal, infection forms into those wounds, and then you've got endless problems with that, and then that can become progressively worse with the tree. So we need to discuss, what do we do? Do we cut our losses with stuff that is potentially declining, that's 15, 20 years old, which it is on a life cycle, let's face it, they are declining. Plums tend to fruit at the base of 1-year-old wood and subsequent years older wood on kind of along the shoots essentially. So it is making sure you have that nice open V. You don't ever see really plums trained as espaliers, because the wood's quite brittle as well, and snapping's really, really common as well. So it is making sure you get those nice ribs in, get those laterals in, nicely spaced where possible. And then make your decisions about training, filling the framework, and then actually looking at shortening buds. I guess it's interesting with the bud formation, because some of these have so little on it. So I guess we need to decide about, we might cut them to a couple of buds to maybe help promote spurs for next year. Some of them I think we might just leave completely as well, to see what they do in spring. There's also a lot of kind of just branches that might have their use for training in, but you can see there's a lot of kind of just dog legs and things that have been pruned, and not pruned necessarily that well, that have actually just branched off into different directions. So we really need to look at our ultimate structure. I mean, there's definitely going to be areas that we can't prune in or training because it's going to snap. Things like coming out needs to be taken like right out against the wall, so we can either use secateurs. I mean, you've got areas that probably aren't going to be salvaged here at the base. We need to try and keep an open centre that will just need to come out at their point of origin on here, that are just going to be too low, for instance, and are going to be very, very dense. So we really kind of need to try and keep that as open where we can, but also really just trying to get this mess out of the way first. But we have to be really careful we don't prune everything out. So you can see on here, I mean, this is not really useful for the framework. It's too low, it's very vigorous, it's very upright. So I really start to just take this out in sections, just taking the weight out of this. Just really taking any low pieces. And you can see all of this stuff's very congested, it's very low down as well. So really taking out some of these pieces on here. And again, you can see doing a nice cut. Nice clean cut here. So just taking out anything that's not going to be useful for the framework.
The students get stuck into the pruning of the plums and gauges, using not just secateurs but pruning saws for the older branches that need to be removed. Plums, peaches and apricots all tend to fruit better on younger wood, so there's a constant process of renewal going on. The gardener's job is to think ahead and ensure that the new growth that fits the fan shape is tied into the structure.
It's not quite off a big stem, but maybe this one, you know, because you've got this one here, which maybe you may or may not turn into a branch here. So maybe you could take that one right off there because it's so upright.
As we removed some of the outward growing branches, ones that were too vertical or just too old, the fan shape began to reappear. We were unable to climb up ladders on this occasion, so we couldn't remove some of the highest branches, leaving that to the Audley end team to tackle in a few weeks' time. Next, we moved around to the south-facing wall to work on a fruit that really enjoys the full warmth of the sun.
So this is a wonderful Moor Park apricot that is about 5 years old, and it's being fan trained. You can see it's still got the bamboo sticks there. Some bits have got away a bit, so they need tying back into the wall, but they are part of the main structure of the fan. So what we're doing, again, because it's a stone fruit, we're limited to pruning between April and September, and so now being the end of August, it's a little bit late to be tying in some of this new growth because it's already lignified. It's got quite stiff and solid, but I would be thinking, right, that one is quite a useful, nice young branch, and it will eventually replace this one here. In 2 or 3 years' time, this one will be getting quite old. So I'm going to hang on to that one and tuck it in, find the relevant wire and tie it in the right direction. This one is coming from a similar point. We could again fill that gap there and regard that as a replacement, say, for this one here that needs to come out. So again, every time you prune, you're thinking a few years ahead and what's going to be your best fruiting wood. Now, all this depends on your walls being wired or prepared for tying in, and so you'll see historically this wall is peppered with little nail holes because back in the Georgian period they didn't have wire. So what they did, they had a system called tagging, and that is showing you somebody's tried a similar system here. Each time you did a prune or you wanted to tie a new piece of growth in, you would use a strip of linen or sometimes a strip of leather, and you would fold that around the branch and knock a new nail in. So there are literally millions of nail holes. But of course, these are historic gardens and the fabric of the walls is quite delicate. We can't continue with that system. So wires were introduced in the Victorian period. They rely on really good tension because the weight, you can imagine the weight of that branch is going to pull a wire off a wall really easily. It also relies on good anchoring. The mortar here is lime mortar, fairly old and not very good for putting the actual tensioners into. So here they've put the tensioners into the bricks, and you can see there's a little mechanism there that you can tighten up the wire several times a year during the growing, the young period of the tree. There are other methods used in historic gardens, wooden trellis or even vertical posts put on the wall, but this is the least invasive because you can generally follow the mortar line and you don't even read the wires.
Those wires are really put to the test by perhaps the most vigorous fruit tree in the garden, the fig.
We've planted it in a planting pit, which I don't know if you can see as you come in close. So we've used some slabs, it's about 2 foot square slabs, and planted these, which were bare root. Again, as an organic garden, we can only plant bare root transplants. We can't get them as pots and plant them in. And bare root is better, I think, for lots of reasons anyway. They're only planted about 4 or 5 years ago, so they're only really just starting to fruit. So that it will take quite a few years to reach some kind of fruiting potential anyway. So they're still getting there, and some of this will certainly help today. And what I would say normally, like any tree, it's like a painting, stand back and look at it, what you're trying to achieve, and it's quite hard today in summer because there's a massive shoots and leaves everywhere. Looking at your more established structure, if we're talking about more mature specimens or ones that are growing on, trying to get your ribs together, much like we were talking about the plums yesterday. Have we got the spacing right? Are there any pieces that are congested that we need to remove? Which in winter you could be quite tough with them. You can cut anything back to a bud or so, tying anything to the framework, to our post and to our wire system. Anything growing beyond the top wire we can take back, because again it's just going to keep going vertical. We really want to take that dominance out at the top. We achieve about 1 crop a year. Under glass you can get to 2 crops, and we've had some under glass before which do okay. So you're really looking for a combination of different fruits this time of year. 3 types of fruits. You've got the fruits that have already ripened from last year, the things that we might eat, so about August, September, which we've got 1 or 2, certainly some in pots. You've got the fruitlets here that, again, that have really formed from spring, that aren't really going to do anything now. They're not going to ripen in time. So if you do see those on your tree or on your fan, you can either take them off, because again that'll put energy into anything ripening, or you can just let them drop off yourself. So they're not going to come to much. So that's kind of your second key. I think for me that's the most important thing. I think, you know, it's great to have a crop you can harvest now, but the crop I'm looking for is your nice little pea-sized embryonic fruits in the leaf axils. So we can pass that around if you want. It's these little kind of pea-like bumps. So these are going to be next year's fruits. So these are, so a year from now, these would be hopefully, going well, fully formed figs on here. There's these little bumps on here, so that will be that will be next year's crop. So if you can identify those, they're the ones that we can hopefully try and train in, identify and encourage to perform for next summer really.
By the end of the afternoon, the growth had been tied back to the wall, keeping as many of these embryonic fruits to come to maturity next year as possible. The wonderful dahlia display now has a lot more room to breathe, and the apricot on the south wall gets all the sunshine it needs.